Commons Standing Committee on Agriculture and Agri-Food. I'm going to start with a few reminders. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format. The proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website, and just so you're aware, the webcast will always show the person speaking as opposed to the entirety of the committee. You know that screenshots are not permitted, and of course, following the health guidelines according to the Board of Internal Economy. I want to start. We certainly have, we're going to continue on our study of global food security. This is something that we've been studying since June, and we're turning a domestic focus. We have 3 different witnesses in the room. So pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Monday, May 30th, 2022, the committee is resuming its study of global food insecurity. And I'd like to welcome the witnesses to our panel right now. I do see Mr. Parent's hand, and I want to let him know that there was sound checks done ahead of time for translation services. Mr. Lemaire had failed his technical test. All other witnesses have passed. He had to travel last minute and has forgot his House of Commons issued headset. He is in the second panel. If the translation services are not adequate, if the earbuds that he have does not work, he unfortunately will not be able to participate. But everyone else, Mr. Parent, did go through that service. And I want to start with our panelists that are here. On the screen, we have Dr. Evan Fraser, who is the director of Arrow Food Institute at University of Guelph, and he's joining again by video conference. From Cereals Canada, Mark Walker, Vice President of Markets and Trades, and Mr. Walker joins us today in person in Ottawa. Great to see you, Mr. Walker. And we also have from the Global Institute of Food Security, Dr. Steve Webb, who is the Chief Executive Officer by video conference from Saskatoon. And Dr. Webb, it's great to see you. I had the opportunity to join you in April in Saskatoon, and certainly appreciate the work that you do. So we're going to give 5 minutes for opening statements. We are a little bit time constrained today because of the vote, so we're going to move as quickly as possible. I'm going to start with Dr. Evan Fraser. You have up to 5 minutes. I'll start with you.
Thank you. So what a great opportunity. And in these brief comments, I'd like to lay out sort of 4 points for you to ensure that Canada uses advanced agri-food technologies to both expand exports, which was the question I was asked to pose or ponder, and at the same time be a global leader in what we're calling the digital agriculture revolution, which is a way of addressing climate change. So looking for some win-wins here. And first, the obvious, we have to invest in our infrastructure more. Today, as we know, the prairies, it's an almost unique resource globally in terms of its ability to produce grains and oilseeds, plants, and animal-based proteins. That capacity goes through the Rocky Mountains on a very small number of train lines. Every few years, that's disrupted. Just last week, I was on a panel with the Vice President of Operations for Vancouver Port, and he discussed how the bottlenecks are spreading even now as we speak. So the fragility of our trading system harms our ability to be that breadbasket for the world we aspire Canada to be, and we need to make our transportation infrastructure more of a focus. Second point, create financial incentives to reward farmers who adopt greenhouse gas mitigating management practices and then market ourselves as sustainable to world markets. So by embracing what some of us are calling regenerative agriculture, encouraging farmers to use more complicated crop rotations that take greenhouse gases out of the atmosphere, by using smart tractors that are very, very efficient with fertilizer, agriculture can become a source of the climate solution as opposed to a source of greenhouse gas emissions. And doing that will allow us to build a global sustainability brand that will be a trade advantage in an increasingly climate-concerned world. And without giving too much away, my institute, the Arrow Food Institute, together with the CEO's office at Royal Bank and Boston Consulting Group, on October 25th, we're releasing the first of a series of reports that tackle that issue. But the punchline of these reports is that we need a federal carbon pricing mechanism that captures agriculture, sends the signals to farmers to do the right thing, and gives us a basis on which to build a sustainable trade brand. Third, if we want to produce the food, we have to train the right people. This requires us to address the labor shortage. This means we have to train people, encourage young people to come into agriculture, and rebrand agriculture away from the idea that it involves a straw hat and a red barn towards the understanding that the farmer of the future is as likely to wear a lab coat as she or he is to drive a tractor. Ag is part of the innovation economy, and we need to investment in our curriculums and our skills that we train people with. And I think if Canada wants to expand our exports in the long term, we need a technologically savvy workforce that's ready to drive innovation. And fourth and finally, my last point, we need to invest in the tools of what some of us call the digital agriculture revolution. The same tools that give us smartphones and are transforming medicine are finding their ways into the barns and the food processing facilities. Controlled environment agriculture or vertical farming, robotic harvesters and milkers that allow us to boost production while reducing inputs, more efficient processing facilities, smart packaging, just the tip of the iceberg of what technology can unlock for us. And I think Canada needs to be at the head of this wave of innovation. And we should do this by creating ag tech innovation zones, give particular areas preferential tax and immigration status, land use planning permissions, competitive utility rates, and germinate a Canadian Silicon Valley for food. There's a lot of good stuff already going on in the world and going on in our country already. Just a quick example of a public-private partnership run by the Weston Family Foundation. It's a homegrown innovation challenge designed to spark innovative thinking on these technologies in our country. So to close, I think 4 points. Expanding our transportation infrastructure, creating carbon markets and a global sustainability brand, training the next generation to be technologically savvy users of this digital agriculture revolution, and creating ag tech innovation zones. These 4 strategies, I think, would allow us to grow exports into the long term and also allow us to reach that vision that the Advisory Council for Economic Growth, the Barton Report, gave us in 2016, which is that Canada should be the world's trusted supplier of safe and sustainable food in the 21st century. So with that, I'd like to thank you and open the floor for questions or whatever you want, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Fraser. Actually, below time and very well done. We're going to now turn to Mr. Walker. You have up to 5 minutes, and then we will get the chance for questions, Mr. Fraser, after we're done all our panelists.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the committee, thank you for having me here today. My name is Mark Walker. I'm the Vice President of Markets and Trade at Cereals Canada. Cereals Canada is the national industry association for wheat, durum, barley, and oats in Canada. Our membership includes the full value chain from farmers to crop development companies, grain handlers, and exporters. Our members are focused on the benefits of export-led growth facilitated by access to diverse global markets. Canadian cereals are a staple food exported to every corner of the world. In the last half-decade, Canadian wheat exports have reached over 80 countries. In an average year, Canadian farmers plant 35 million acres of cereals, resulting in 27 million tons of exports and over $9 billion in export revenue. For generations, Canadian farmers have grown crops that feed the world. While global populations have grown, the demand for food has grown with them. Canada's cereal growers have risen to this challenge by embracing innovative practices while increasing our country's ability to produce for ourselves and for export. Improved seed varieties have led to greater yields across our industry, and new crop production technologies have allowed producers to grow their crops more efficiently while reducing their environmental footprint. In the 1980s, wheat yields averaged 27 bushels per acre across 27 million seeded acres. While seeded acres of wheat have fallen to 15 million, our yields have increased to over 50 bushels per acre. The precision and success with which growers farm today is a testament to decades of enabling regulations, investment in research, and a willingness to innovate. Government's role in this progress has been notable and is greatly appreciated. As our industry undertakes to manage growing seasons increasingly characterized by drought, excess moisture, and a volatile climate, all while seeking to ensure consistent production for export, we would highlight the continued role that government has to play in this space. We believe export success begins at home with Canadian production of sustainable food. Farmers need access to science-based regulations to support the productivity, reliability, and quality of Canadian exports. A trade environment that facilitates the production and export of Canadian agriculture products is key to strengthening Canada's contributions to global food security in the coming years. Outside of our borders, industry and government can also work together on market development and market access initiatives to cultivate opportunities for growth and diversification across more than 80 markets that purchase Canadian cereals. Cereals Canada houses a dedicated team of experts focused on market maintenance, market development, market access, and trade policy. Our team of experts tirelessly represents the Canadian cereals industry across the world to our international customers and international and domestic governments to ensure that Canadian cereals make their way to global markets in the most efficient way possible. Where barriers arise, we proactively seek solutions. Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada's agri-marketing program, which we have successfully subscribed to for over a decade, plays a key role in this work. As we diversify our international markets for wheat, barley, and oats, we will continue to look to this incredibly important program to build on our successes and advance global food security. In addition to our markets and trade team, Cereals Canada's technical team of experts works with international customers to ensure they get the most and best use from Canadian cereals. Canadian wheat is used as an improver wheat around the world. Blending Canadian wheat with lower protein, lower quality alternatives improves the function and use when making food products for customers. In an environment of rising food costs and supply disruptions, our experts are working with international customers on how to use Canadian wheat to its maximum value. Using our equipment and expertise, our teams work with customers to streamline various processes within their production systems. For example, through our understanding of the requirements of various customers, our pilot mill in downtown Winnipeg has helped reduce the number of milling cycles required to produce the flour for our customers' end-use products, saving resources and increasing affordability. Earlier this month, members of this same team provided a workshop at the African Milling School in Kenya to help train millers from across Africa on best practices when using Canadian wheat. Last week, we hosted a group of North African durum millers for conversations about this year's harvest to outline quality expectations for use in their mills. Several years ago, we undertook a significant knowledge transfer exercise, helping to open a technical facility in Morocco focused on durum wheat, milling, and couscous production. Increasingly, our conversations with global customers highlight concerns regarding the tightening supplies of wheat and the role that our organization can play in meeting those challenges. Ultimately, a stronger trade environment, supported by enabling domestic policies, will enhance contributions to global food security while unlocking greater diversification, opportunities for the development of the Canadian economy. Thank you. I look forward to your questions.
2 for 2. Thank you very much, Mr. Walker, right on time. Dr. Webb, over to you for up to 5 minutes.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Mr. Chair, and thanks for the invitation to be here today. The Global Institute for Food Security is a government, industry, and academic partnership, and I'd like to begin my testimony with a critically important statement. Global food insecurity is global insecurity. Norman Borlaug noted, "You can't build a peaceful world on empty stomachs and human misery." Mr. Chair, at no time has this statement been more poignant than it is now. Global population is expanding rapidly, and we have the challenge of feeding a growing world with limited resources such as land, water, and nutrients, as well as other challenges, both natural and entirely self-inflicted, such as Russia's invasion of Ukraine, all threaten the resiliency of the global food system and our ability to feed the world sustainably. However, there's a solution to these challenges. In Canada, we are one of a handful of nations that are net producers of food, and we do so in a manner that's economically, environmentally, and socially sustainable. We have the food, fuel, and fertilizer the world needs, and our agriculture and food sectors poised to feed a growing world. However, to succeed, we need to support the industry with appropriate policies that enable us to take advantage of the opportunities before us. The previous two witnesses have mentioned the Barton report, and again, they identified the opportunity here, and the report's right. And so today I'd like to recommend 4 domestic policy opportunities that can improve Canada's exports on the global stage. First is around innovation. We cannot continue to tackle today and tomorrow's challenges with yesterday's tools and technologies. We need innovation to help deliver the greatest positive impact through our ag and food sectors. Unfortunately, Canada's innovation input does not produce the returns on investments we should expect. The most recent Conference Board of Canada report ranks our nation as 8th in investments, but 23rd in outcomes achieved. We need to remedy this situation by creating a coherent, integrated national innovation strategy. Innovation is a team sport, and we can no longer focus on revamping one part of the system without consideration of all areas involved. The next policy recommendation is to drive major capital investments into infrastructure. We can't recommend a policy to improve Canadian exports without addressing the infrastructure to support this, such as rural wireless connectivity, our ports and rail systems. Investments in our infrastructure ensure Canada remains competitive and regain its reputation as a reliable supplier. Canada must own this. Third policy recommendation is around regulatory modernization through the creation of a transparent, predictable, science-based, interactive, and enabling regulatory framework. Our ag and food sectors are impacted by regulatory complexity and bottlenecks, which limits producer and consumer access to the latest proven innovations. A highly functional regulatory framework is a competitive advantage for Canada, and it builds trust both here domestically as well as internationally. We know this can be done, but it shouldn't take a crisis for things to work. Let's lay the building blocks now for modernizing our regulatory system to embrace a science-based approach that supports innovation. The last policy recommendation I'd like to highlight relates to sustainability. Canada is one of the world's most sustainable producers of food, and we need to be proud of the strides that we've made and how far we've come. Changes in agronomic practices, Dr. Fraser mentioned regenerative agriculture, such as no-till, variable rate fertilizer application in Western Canada, and in particular in Saskatchewan, have resulted in 22% more land being in annual production with the elimination of summer fallow. And remarkably, on the production intensity basis, farmers in Western Canada have decreased nitrogen fertilizer use by 28% per bushel per acre over the last 30 years. When we consider policy changes, such as recent discussions to reduce fertilizer emissions and by extension usage, we must consider the unintended consequences of such policies. Not doing so will paint an inaccurate picture of how sustainable Canadian agriculture is and will lead to public mistrust or of our resilient and sustainable agriculture system. This will in turn negatively impact export opportunities. We need to lead the way on this, and Canada should not be following. One last point I'd like to leave the committee is we need to bring all parties together to the table to address these challenges. GIF's model of industry, government, and academia partnership embraces the best of all three of the stakeholders needed to advance innovation. We need to capture the wisdom of the room with all of the stakeholders. As I wrap up, I'd like to thank you, Mr. Chair, and the members of the House Committee for the invitation and the opportunity to share my thoughts with you today. I look forward to questions. Thank you.
3 for 3. Well done to our witnesses for timing. Colleagues, because there was some delay with the votes, we have about 45 minutes per panel. So the way I'm going to do this is each party will get a first 6-minute round, and then we will allow for 2.5 minutes for the Liberal and Conservatives on the second round. So, Mr. Barlow, you're going to lead us off for the Conservatives.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thanks to our witnesses, and appreciate your patience as we sort of get back to normal and having votes, and unfortunately that does delay committee sometimes. To Dr. Webb first, and I appreciate your comments about the need for science-based decision-making and regulatory regime. In your opinion, would the fertilizer emissions reduction policy be a decision or a policy that's based on sound science, and if not, why?
I think what I would like to well, there's some interesting feedback, is the intention of the policy is right in the context of reducing the emissions. However, I think the approach is only being looked at in the context of the emission standard. I think we need to take that holistic production intensity approach to ensure that we have a policy framework that delivers economic, environmental, and social outcomes that lead to sustainability. And again, I think if you look at the results that I've mentioned, the 22% increase in land in production, as well as the 28% reduction in nitrogen use per bushel per acre, is again data points that I think can inform policy to allow and ensure us that we have the one that creates the most competitive environment for Canada in the global marketplace.
And to that point, and I appreciate you mentioned that our producers have already reduced fertilizer use 28% in many parts of the country. Would it not be? And you talked about the narrative around this. Would it not have been, if reducing emissions is indeed our goal, which I think is very laudable? Would it not have been more beneficial in the narrative, but certainly to our producers, to say to other countries around the world, if we need to reduce emissions, why not take a look at what Canada is doing? We are the gold standard. We have already reduced fertilizer. Why don't you take a look at our our innovation, our technology, and learn from our practices here in Canada? Would that have not have been a more successful approach to this and reducing emissions in other countries by following our standard?
I think that's the opportunity for Canada to lead the way and provide and share those innovations. One of the things that today, all of the witnesses that are appearing in front of this committee are members of the National Ag and Food Performance Index. And that index is a coalition of over 100 organizations that includes federal government agents, departments, as well as provincial. Evan and I are part of the index from the not-for-profit community, industry players, large and small, all of the producer groups. And it's a very interesting Canadian solution to benchmarking economic, environmental, social, as well as food integrity opportunities to, again, showcase and highlight and have Canada lead the way. We should not be following. We should not be ashamed of the impact that innovation has made in agriculture. The first time I came to Western Canada, I was 14 years old, and almost half the land that I saw was under summer fallow, and now it's not. So thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Webb. I just want to turn to Mr. Walker now, and I know you talked about transportation. There are 8 union contracts with railways that expire on December 31st. Everything that I've heard that we could have our yields up about 50% compared to last year, which was admittedly a difficult year. What impact has rail capacity had on our ability to meet some of our goals in terms of trade opportunities, moving goods, and potentially is the industry looking at what could be happening later on this year?
Thank you for your question. So, you made some good points about harvest and yields. At the end of the day, Canadian exporters need trade infrastructure that keeps up with capacity to meet growing export demand. We know that for cereals, this year's harvest is going to be 56% larger than last year's. Harvest is 80% complete across Canada as of last week. So with this in mind, our export sector is certainly eager to work with the railways to ensure that Canadian grain gets to market in a timely and efficient manner.
What are there some specific steps that the industry has looked at in terms of rail service, federal policy that we can do to ensure that food security, not only domestically, but our ability to meet demand globally as well?
Well, I'm a markets and trade expert. I do some work on transportation policy, but Cereals Canada is a member of Canada's Ready coalition. And so we have a landing page, canadasready.ca, that outlines our asks of government as well as the railways moving forward into this critical harvest. And I will provide that information to the committee so that it can be included as part of the study.
I just have one, maybe time for one last quick question, maybe to Dr. Webb as well on that. You talked about infrastructure, ports, rail. What impact, or is there something specific on the rail side when we see that these union agreements could be expiring December 31st? What would you like to see there from a federal policy to ensure that rail keeps moving?
Again, I think we've seen even when the threat of strikes come up, it creates uncertainty in the supply chain. And any way to mitigate labor disruptions would be beneficial to all in the system.
Thank you, Dr. Webb. Thank you, Mr. Barlow. We're going to turn to Mr. Drouin for 6 minutes. Over to you.
Great. Thanks very much for the witnesses to be here. Just a quick question on transportation, and maybe Mr. Walker, you can comment. And I would also like to get Dr. Fraser's opinion, because you've mentioned transportation is important. So I recently found out like the delta for a train to be on time is about 4 hours. So if you're 4 hours before, you're on time. If you're 4 hours after you've set a time, you're on time from the both companies that are operating in Canada. Are they actively trying to work with your members to reduce that delta so that they're on time? And how does that compare to the U.S., for instance? Because we know there's strike potential in the U.S. as well. So we often hear about CNCP, but I don't know what's happening in the U.S. And if you're talking to some of your counterparts in the U.S., what's the relationship down there with their rail companies?
So rail times are down across the network by weeks, is my understanding. We have half the capacity that we did this year compared to last year. beyond those statistics, I can't speak to specifics, but certainly I can look to provide that information to the committee.
Dr. Fraser, I know you've met with the VP for the, I think you've mentioned the VP for the Vancouver Port Authority. What was he or she? I don't know who she or he is, but what were they saying in terms of trying to expand the network so that we can get grains out to the marketplace quicker and on time?
Well, it was a couple of key points that he was making last week. It was an event organized as part of between the Canadian Embassy in Japan, the Japanese Embassy in Canada, and the Mutual Chambers of Commerce to discuss better connections between Canada and Japan on ag exports. Two main points. One, the extraordinary logistical challenges that the Port Authority is doing in terms of just physically bringing that volume of stuff into the area and under an environment of extraordinarily constrained labor conditions, getting it onto the ships and getting the ships out. And so he was laying out a series of innovations using technology that they were embarked on that was going to try to relieve that bottleneck. But then he made the very obvious point that as you move back up east out of Vancouver and into the Rocky Mountains, you end up with these tiny umbilical links between the prairies and world markets. And it just sort of struck me the absurdity, not the absurdity, but the fragility of that image of the Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, these enormous, like the size of Europe, and all of the food production in this area, the size of Europe, going through essentially a small number of rail lines through a couple of passes, and just the inherent fragility of the system that we've inherited and that we've allowed to continue. And there has to be a way of reducing the bottlenecks that emerge in that system, because as we just heard, the system buckles every couple of years. It buckles, and certainly the article in the Financial Post last week by Jake Edmonston suggests that we're into another situation this year where we are not going to be able to be that breadbasket that our country should be.
Yeah, and nobody's expecting us to move mountains if I can.
Literally.
But we've noticed actually the fragility of that supply network through when the BC floods happen. We've noticed that obviously it's a danger. Dr. Fraser, while I have you here, it's good to see you. Your second point you've mentioned is financial incentives and carbon markets, and I know, having spoken to farmers, they are ready to participate in a carbon market, even for carbon offsets for other companies. The problem is sometimes how do you measure it and how do you make it less cumbersome on farmers, meaning not having auditors come on your land and perform audits, which increases red tape. So is there technologies that you've seen that could reduce that burdensome on farmers so they can participate in that marketplace?
So you've hit the proverbial nail on the head there. We need what the technical language is measurement, verification, and reporting system, MRVs, to measure both the additional carbon that is sequestered by, say, a change in management practices, but also the permanence of that carbon in the soil.
90?
Up until now, most of the MRVs have been based on audits. They have been cumbersome. They have been extremely expensive to administer. It costs more to administer them than the value of the carbon at current carbon market prices. However, I'm pretty optimistic that with a bit of a sprint and some concerted effort, we could move an MRV out of the field and into a remote sensing process. And really what we need to be working towards is what they call passive collection. So satellite imagery tied with soil science monitors through an Internet of Things network. It's the sort of stuff that GIFs and Steve work on. I know it's the sort of stuff we're working on. It's the stuff that this Royal Bank project that I alluded to is very, very focused on. And can we, over the next 2 or 3 years, marshal the science to move MRVs from a ground level, ground truth monitoring system to something that can be done on remote sensing? And the short answer is yes, but it's still going to take a little bit of work. And the academics that I work with are very keen to work with Ag Canada and the Living Labs Network to further that.
Thank you. Dr. Webb, I know you've made some mentions about the fertilizer emissions. I'm just asking, have you, because I have 20 seconds, have you made a submission to the consultation?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. I'm done.
Thank you, Dr. Fraser, Dr. Webb, and Mr. Drouin. Maintenant, nous avons Monsieur Parent.
Now we have Mr. Perron for 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witnesses for being here with us. Mr. Fraser, I would like to continue with you, and please try to not speak too quickly because it can be difficult for the interpreters. Mr. Fraser, can you tell me, when you're talking about verification tools of the soil performance, for soil yield, you said that rather than going and working physically, that you could do it through remote sensing, the image satellites? Did I understand that clearly?
The opportunity to clarify and also the reminder to slow down. I appreciate both. So the state of the science right now is that we currently measure soil carbon using soil probes, soil sensors, which requires people walking into the field and actually taking soil samples and measuring them. Increasingly, the goal is to use satellite imagery, which is now as a sufficient resolution that satellites are increasingly being able to distinguish between major crop types, and then use the color and the size of the foliage, so the amount of green and the amount of red that the plants reflect back, and the size of the foliage as a way of interpreting and interpolating how much carbon is being absorbed by the soil. Now, this requires a lot of artificial intelligence algorithms to link observations on the ground with the observations from the satellite. So there's some scientific research that definitely needs to be done. So I do not want to say we are ready to launch a measurement, reporting, and verification system using only remote sensing yet. But I think with a few years of work collecting soil data, relating it to remote sensing data, we should be able to build artificial intelligence algorithms that predict based on a small questionnaire that farmers would fill in, plus the remote sensing data, how much additional carbon or greenhouse gases are being absorbed by the soil. That's the trajectory the scientists are on right now.
Infiniment pour la clarification, c'est beaucoup plus.
Thank you for that clarification. It's much clearer. So I understand that the research is still ongoing and it will take investment to speed up the digital revolution. So this famous digital revolution, which we're in the midst of, you're saying we need to invest. And earlier at point 2, you said that we have to fund sustainable practices. We have to acknowledge what producers are doing and encourage them financially. So how do you see that? So I see that you want large investment. It's not that I disagree with that, but could you give us an idea of your vision of the situation?
So two parts to the vision. One that is largely related to farmers that are currently producing grains or oil seeds and livestock. There is a lot that can be done to encourage those farmers to adopt management practices that are more energy and technologies that are more energy efficient, more efficient in terms of nutrient use and other inputs, and like Professor Webb said, management practices such as crop rotation or more complicated crop rotation that would help the soil build up organic matter. There's a wide range of technological and management practices a farmer can do in order to become a sink for greenhouse gases rather than a source of emissions. However, at the moment, farmers are not incentivized to do that. And I led a study a couple of years ago where we showed farmers where they could manage their farms more sustainably. And their response to us was, yeah, we know that, but we don't get paid for that. So the concept that, say, the Royal Bank is playing with is, can we establish what we might call carbon farms, where farmers are financially rewarded both for the food they produce, but also for the greenhouse gases that they absorb. And that would be one part of the vision. The second part of the vision is really with regards to greenhouses, vertical farms, alternative protein supplies, where I'm aware, I'm participating in initiatives in Israel or Singapore, where the truly most cutting edge science is being applied to food systems. And I'm worried that Canada doesn't have a comparison or an equivalent sort of zone or nucleus of technological innovation in agriculture. specifically things like vertical farming or cellular agriculture. And
Je
I think
je
we are
m'excuse
losing-
je m'excuse de vous interrompre.
Sorry about interrupting you, but I'd like to know what Mr. Walker's opinion is there. You talked about your pilot mill that reduced the numbers of cycles. So I would like to hear what you have to say in 30 seconds, basically.
Yeah.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, so our team of experts work with our customers based on their production needs for the end-use products. So we have experienced situations where a miller will come to us and say, I'm having a conversation with my baker. They want something, I'm doing something. There's a bit of a disconnect. And so our team, because we have both experts in-house, can have a conversation with both of them, be the go-between, as it were, and find a solution that works for both, because in this way they're quite complementary. And so that work has helped us help our customers around the world really make the most efficient use, whether it's upcycling different kinds of bran or, as I mentioned, reducing the milling cycles to really make sure that what's being undertaken is exactly what's needed and casting aside what's not.
Merci, Monsieur Walker, Monsieur Perron.
Thank you, Mr. Walker and Mr. Perron.
6 minutes, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'd like to use the beginning of my 6 minutes just to read a notice of motion into the record. And I know the clerk has a copy of that in both official languages. So I'll just read it out. The motion is as follows: that pursuant to Standing Order 1082, the committee undertake a study on profit-driven inflation in the grocery sector and the costs of groceries going up while large chains are making record profits. That the committee examine the record profits of large grocery chains and their CEOs in relation to employee wages and the cost of groceries in Canada. That the committee also examine the ability of large grocery chains leveraging their size to cut into the earnings of Canadian farmers. That the committee invite witnesses with specific knowledge on profit-driven inflation and affected stakeholders from the industry, including grocers' CEOs, economists, unions, and farmers or representative organizations. That no fewer than 6 meetings are set aside to hear from witnesses. That the committee report its findings to the House, and that pursuant to Standing Order 109, the government table a comprehensive response to the report. So that's just a notice of motion for all of my colleagues to consider in the coming days. With that, Mr. Chair, I'll continue with my questions. I want to join with my colleagues in thanking the witnesses to appearing before our committee and helping guide us through this study. Dr. Fraser, I'd like to start with you. The Arrell Food Institute, I can remember our committee visited Guelph University back in 2018, and we were really impressed with some of the amazing work that your university is undertaking. I'm glad you mentioned climate change in your submission and mentioned in your opening remarks. One of our earlier witnesses on this study was Oxfam, and they noted in their look at this issue that over the last 20 years, there has been an 819% increase in weather-related humanitarian funding appeals. So we have a huge crisis going on right now in the Horn of Africa. The head of the World Food Program was in the news today talking about the crisis that exists there. So they are experiencing severe droughts that's impacted the ability of local farmers to produce food for the local population. And then, of course, the region was hit with the war in Ukraine, which, Ukraine being a breadbasket for the region, essentially had its exports of grain cut off for a number of months, and we're still recovering from that backlog. So, and we know climate change is impacting our farmers' abilities. My province of BC was cut off from the rest of Canada last November. And we know that farmers in the prairies have experienced extreme droughts and extreme flooding events, which has impacted our ability to produce to our full potential. So I guess my question is that, at the same time that our country is trying to increase its production, we're also fighting this rearguard action against what climate change is doing to our production. And we also know that countries around the world are struggling with the same problems, but they don't have the resiliency and technological know-how or the funding resources that our government has. I was wondering if you had any thoughts on how Canadian expertise and know-how could be used in countries like places like in Africa to help build that local resiliency, so that when the rug is pulled out from underneath them, like when a country like Ukraine suddenly has its exports cut out, what can we do to build the resiliency, and maybe how can Canada step in to fill that void? If you have any thoughts on that in the next couple of minutes, it'd be appreciated.
You should take my class in this course. Thank you for the question. Resiliency often has different layers or different lines of defense, and the ability of the ecosystem to produce food in a drought is the first line of defense. So anything a farmer can do to build up soil organic matter, plant some windbreaks, they're very practical things that don't necessarily need a lot of technology. So working with the Oxfams of this world or the Canadian Food Grain Banks to do the on-the-ground development work in remote locations or vulnerable locations is a very, very good first start. Build up the resilience of the agri-ecosystem. Then there's the what I would consider a technology layer, which would be, can we use a drought resilient seed? Lots of challenges with how to use, different kinds of seeds more or less equitably, but there are seeds we can breed to be more drought resistant. Can we use remote sensing data, but getting back to satellites, to sort of predict when droughts might emerge so that we can help the World Food Program position itself 6, 8, 10 weeks in advance of a crisis? And that's sort of a middle level of defense. Agri-ecosystem at the beginning, technology at the higher, community level defenses, people working together. And can we invest in civil society? And then finally, your ultimate line of defense is people like organizations like the World Food Program. And so I think the appropriate strategy is to work sort of at a portfolio level at these different scales of defense to build a sort of a comprehensive climate resilient process or portfolio. The specifics of how you would do that would be different in Canada versus the Horn of Africa. But the fact that you've got these layers of defense is pretty common across the world. So that's where I would go.
Thank you. That takes me to my 6 minutes. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. McGregor. Thank you, Dr. Fraser. We have 5 minutes left, colleagues, in the first panel. Mr. Epp, I have you for 2.5 minutes, followed by Mr. Turnbull.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for coming.
Mr. Falk, I apologize. Your mic isn't. First of all, I apologize that it wasn't you. I thought it was Mr. Epp. And now over to you for 2.5.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to all our witnesses for attending here and for your testimony here. Yesterday, I had the privilege of listening to David Beasley, the former governor of South Carolina, who is the current executive director of the UN World Food Program. He was here in Parliament giving a presentation. And he said a few things, but he reiterated, Dr. Webb, some of the things that you talked about, and that's the looming global crisis that we face and the geopolitical instability that will be created by a food instability problem if we don't address that problem. You in your report mentioned that we need to consider innovation and regulatory issues. I'm wondering, could you, and that regulatory issues need to be science-based, could you expand a little bit further on regulations that we need to be innovative about?
I think one of the opportunities for us in Canada is to have a regulatory system. A regulatory system is important. It builds confidence both domestically and internationally. What we have is a very complicated system that creates a lot of bottlenecks. We celebrated the approval of gene editing by Health Canada, but we're still awaiting CFI's approval to be able to practice the technology. And for a perspective, that is about a decade behind where the United States was on the same ruling. So we need, and why do I know that? It was my team at Dow AgroSciences that led that first inquiry into the U.S. regulatory system. I think we need an agency process that's interactive and can collaborate, work, and provide feedback in real time to the companies that are submitting it, engaging stakeholders, as well as the regulators. Look, in the last year with the new vaccine, the COVID-19 vaccines went from idea to product in less than a year. We did not sacrifice safety and we did not sacrifice efficacy. And it was done in a way that works. So again, we don't need
I've got just a few seconds left.
Work.
I would like to get in another question if I could. You talked about
Sure.
capital investments. What is the most strategic capital investment we could be making now to become global leaders in food security?
15 seconds, Dr. Webb.
Port and rail.
Okay, thank you.
Even more efficient. Mr. Turnbull, 2.5 minutes. Over to you.
Dr. Fraser, it's great to have all the panelists here. I'm going to direct my first set of questions to Dr. Fraser. I note that you made some really good suggestions in your opening remarks, all of which I've taken note of. In addition to that, though, I noticed recently I read an article in the Financial Post that you had written, which I thought was really good. I'm going to quote you. You said the global food system depends on three basic assumptions: seamless trade, stable geopolitics, cheap energy, and a moderate climate. And I would say today, and I think you said this in the article, that those assumptions are not being met any longer. And it's naive for us to think that relying on a food system built, that we can rely on the food system built for a different era. So my question to you, in addition to the things you've already said, is there anything else you'd like to tell us about how we build the food system for the 21st century?
Great. Very quickly. Food insecurity is a function of people not being able to afford enough to eat. And so if we want, say, Canadians to be more food secure, we need to address cost of living and housing. So this actually moves us out of food and into wages and the cost of living. So to deal with the food insecurity problem, I think the best levers are housing and wage related. And then in terms of the food production side of things, carbon neutral, technologically innovative, and probably more resiliency, less of this dependent on very, very long supply chains that wind through mountains that could be flooded out. We need to recognize that we are entering the age of disruption and that we need more backup plans and more redundancy in our food system. So whatever we can do to build redundancy. Those would be the two key pillars that I would sort of jump on immediately.
Thank you, Dr. Fraser. And Dr. Webb, I'm going to go to you for one quick question. With limited time here, I note that in your opening remarks, you had focused on innovation and investment. I also note that your organization, with many partnerships, has done a really great job of developing a national index on agri-food performance, which focuses on a set of sustainability indicators, which I think you said that we should be very proud of, and we should. One of the indicators in there was about sustainable finance. I wanted to ask you whether there were opportunities within the realm of sustainable finance that you think could benefit the agri-food sector in terms of this conversation. So,
in about 25 seconds, Dr. Webb.
Thank you for the opportunity. I think at the end of the day, the short answer is yes. Again, you're like that answer. But it's right across the entire ecosystem that we're working in, from farm to research to innovation to the ability to bring it to the marketplace and being able to look at it in the context of how we even enhance the trade opportunities. So again, I think it is definitely a key element in an integrated solution space that we need to pursue as a nation.
Thank you, Mr. Turnbull. Thank you, Dr. Webb. That concludes our first panel, colleagues, but please don't go far because we are going to turn this over very quickly. But on behalf of the committee, let me thank Mr. Walker, who's in the room, and Dr. Webb and Dr. Fraser, both of whom joined us. Really important insights. Thank you for the work that you do, and thank you for your testimony here today. Don't go far, colleagues. We're going to turn this over in 2 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, colleagues, we're going to get started back again. I know everyone's enjoying getting back in person and getting the chance to connect, but we got to get some business done. And today on our second panel, we have from the Canola Council of Canada, Chris Davison, who is Davison, is the Vice President of Stakeholder and Industry Relations. Mr. Davison's in the room. Great to see you. From the Canadian Federation of Agriculture, we have Scott Ross, who serves as the Executive Director. Mr. Ross, great to see you on video conference. And we do have Mr. Ron Lemaire, who is the President of the Canadian Produce Marketing Association. We're going to give your microphone the best chance that we can, but you're up third. So, Mr. Davison, you have up to 5 minutes. I'm going to turn the floor to you.
Great. Thank you, Chair Blois and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you today and to join you with my fellow panelists. As mentioned, my name is Chris Davison, and I'm the Vice President of Stakeholder and Industry Relations with the Canola Council of Canada. The Council encompasses all links in the canola value chain. Our members include canola growers, life science companies, grain handlers, exporters, processors, and other industry participants. Our shared goal is to ensure the industry's continued growth and success, and to do this by meeting global demand for canola and canola-based products, which include food, feed, and fuel. Canola's success is Canada's success. Our industry represents almost $30 billion in economic activity annually, some 207,000 jobs, $12 billion in wages, and the largest share of farm cash receipts in the country. Our strategic plan is built on three key pillars: sustainable and reliable supply, differentiated value, and stable and open trade. In appearing before you today, I was asked to focus comments on domestic policy recommendations that can improve Canadian exports on the global stage. As an industry that exports 90% of what we produce is canola seed, oil, and meal, that is music to my ears. In responding to this request, I'm going to group my remarks into three areas of interest: market access and trade, regulatory initiatives, and innovation. Before doing so, however, I want to acknowledge the very real food insecurity challenges we face. Certainly, the war in Ukraine and other recent events and developments have brought this into focus. However, food insecurity is not an episodic occurrence. It may be more acute or exacerbated at different points in times, but it is systemic in nature and, as we know, has both domestic and international dimensions to it. Canada generally, and our industry specifically, is in a fortunate position to be able to help address some food insecurity challenges. It is a well-established fact that Canada produces more than it needs for domestic purposes, and as I mentioned previously, canola is no exception to this. That said, we are not without our challenges. The biggest among those, and the one with the most direct implications in terms of our ability to contribute to alleviation of food insecurity, is meeting the demand challenge. Demand signals paint a general picture for the foreseeable future of significant demand growth for our industry, driven by global production challenges, geopolitical events, and interest in healthy vegetable oils, among others. These demand signals have in turn served as a catalyst for the development of expanded processing capacity in Canada, as reflected in recent investment announcements and activity totaling close to $2 billion. So it is an exciting and dynamic time for our industry, but in order to realize this growth potential and play a continued and arguably enhanced role in helping to address food insecurity, meeting demand is job number one. Market access and trade, current regulatory initiatives, and innovation all have a critical role to play in this regard. Regarding market access and trade, it is no secret that open borders and open markets are the best ways to help keep food plentiful and play an integral role in price stability. The importance of doing so in the face of the war in Ukraine, as well as other factors including post-COVID protectionism, intensified competition, and the impacts of climate change, to name just a few, is critical. Accordingly, and as part of the broader Canadian agri-food sector, the canola industry is supportive of and an active participant in efforts to open new markets, encourage and demonstrate Canadian leadership in international fora regarding rules-based trade, and strengthening advocacy capacity and government-industry collaboration. In terms of current regulatory initiatives, of which there are several, I would simply say that we need to double down on our commitment to the development and implementation of science and evidence-based regulations that enable the development, commercialization, and access to the tools needed to realize increased production to be able to meet demand. We need to do this to provide clarity, enhance our competitiveness, attract additional investment, and ultimately keep and put new tools in the hands of canola growers as they navigate an increasingly challenging production landscape. As it relates to innovation, it is well recognized that innovation has driven canola to become one of the world's most important oilseeds and Canada's most valuable crop. And we are poised to do even more with not just domestic, economic, or environmental benefits as the result, but also in terms of our ability to help address food insecurity. This past spring, we released a refreshed canola innovation strategy, which outlines a vision for near-term priorities to support the continued growth and development of our industry, inclusive of meeting the demand requirements referenced previously. The strategy encompasses 4 pillars: performance, precision, protection, and product. If successfully implemented in terms of collaboration, effort, funding, and regulation, this strategy will support the next phase of growth of the Canadian canola industry by improving performance, further increasing precision, protecting the crop and markets, and focusing on canola's strengths as an oilseed crop. This will not only create more economic activity, but also enhance our ability to address global food insecurity challenges as a result of the productivity gains that it delivers. We would be pleased to share a copy of the innovation strategy with members of the committee if it is of interest. By way of conclusion, the world wants and needs more Canadian canola, and we need to work in partnership if we are going to work effectively to deliver it, inclusive of addressing food insecurity challenges as well as other shared objectives. We must also recognize that our ability to do so is in no small part dependent on our competitiveness in global markets. So, as we take domestic policy decisions, we must do so in a way that does not add costs that render our products less competitive. Thank you for your time today, and I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Davison. Right now, we're going to turn to Mr. Ross with the Canadian Federation of Agriculture. You have up to 5 minutes. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. I'm speaking to you on behalf of the Canadian Federation of Agriculture, representing approximately 190,000 farm families across Canada from coast to coast to coast. And I would like to thank you for the opportunity to speak on global food insecurity. Earlier this week, I attended a presentation from David Beasley, Executive Director of the UN World Food Programme, where he emphasized that a lack of fertilizer and production issues in major agricultural regions will result in a dramatic increase in the number of people globally impacted by acute food insecurity, already at 345 million people worldwide. The gravity of this situation is only heightened by the link between food insecurity and civil unrest, with his remarks noting the urgent need to maximize global food production and enhance resilience in agri-food systems. Canada is blessed with an enviable endowment of natural resources and highly efficient agricultural producers, yet we're not immune to the global challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic, the war in Ukraine, and climate change. In this era of increasingly connected crises, an over-reliance on either international trade or domestic production leaves nations vulnerable to supply chain disruptions with potentially devastating effects. For example, farmers across Eastern Canada continue to experience uncertain access to fertilizer and recognize that scarcity of this essential input is potentially a reality for years to come. Policies like the tariff on Russian fertilizer only contribute to higher prices for essential inputs as producers already contend with historically high operating costs. There remains an acute need for relief from this financial hardship. Global food insecurity requires a multifaceted whole-of-government approach supporting resilient food supply chains and maximizing food production. In my comments today, I'll touch on a few areas of critical importance in this regard. First, on trade, at the 2021 United Nations Food Systems Summit, UN members agreed that the attainment of the SDGs will depend on fostering stable local food systems supported by fair and rules-based trade. No international policy should create impediments to countries building their own agricultural infrastructure. The world needs strong rules-based trade that enables policy measures promoting stability of supply, such as safety nets, orderly marketing, and supply management. Canada's response to climate change is also a clear example where policies have the potential to affect resilience and our capacity to produce food. Producers need policies that incent climate resilient practices without constraining productivity. This requires collaboration between farmers and governments to leverage farm-level expertise, and CFA continues to call for a working group of farmers, officials, and technical experts to identify pragmatic climate change incentives that support continued productivity growth. On infrastructure, physical and natural infrastructure are also central to our resilience in the face of climate change. Continued investment into the National Trade Corridors Fund is essential to diversify and strengthen our channels to market. CFA also supports the continued development of ecosystem services programming, such as the reverse auction program announced in Budget 2021 for wetlands conservation and restoration. Recognizing farmers for their contributions to floodplain management and other public environmental goods is critical to the sector's long-term resilience. On disaster responses and recovery, resilience also requires a coordinated approach to disaster response and the identification of measures that could mitigate and prevent future risks from occurring. CFA continues to call for collaborative post-disaster reviews as part of the agri-recovery framework, bringing together key stakeholders after the initial disaster response to assess and identify best practices, needed changes, and help design off-the-shelf programming responses where similar situations arise in the future. Finally, on labor and preservation of farm assets. Finally, maximizing Canadian food production requires access to labor and policies that preserve strategic agricultural assets. CFA is working closely with CARC and Food and Beverage Canada on an industry-led national workforce strategic plan to address the acute and systematic labor shortages that constrain our productivity. While industry-led, we look forward to engaging you in the coming months on the collective actions needed to tackle this chronic issue. We must also work to ensure food security isn't sacrificed to conflicting interests. A prime example is a plot of Crown-owned farmland in Surrey, BC being put up for sale, despite housing one of the most productive and climate-resilient horticultural operations serving the BC market. This may seem minor in the face of this global issue, but the loss of that land would be a permanent blow to food security in that region, demonstrating how policies across government can unknowingly add to existing food insecurity concerns. In conclusion, global food insecurity is complex, with dramatic implications for political and economic stability around the world. We welcome this committee's commitment to explore Canada's role in responding to mounting global food insecurity. As you deliberate further on this topic, I would leave you with these 4 key areas where Canadian policies can have a direct and positive impact. First, a strong international presence supporting rules-based trade that supports nations in promoting stability of infrastructure and supply. Second, a working group with farmers to ensure environmental policies support enhanced resilience and productivity. Third, collaborative agri-recovery reviews to mitigate and prevent future climate risks. And last, a holistic approach to labor and the preservation of strategic productive assets in Canada. I thank you for your time and welcome any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. Gave you a few extra seconds, but you can buy me a beer next time you see me. I'm just joking. Mr. Lemaire, over to you for 5 minutes, and we'll go from there.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and committee members. On behalf of the Canadian Produce Marketing Association, representing over 840 companies growing, packing, shipping, and selling fresh fruit and vegetables domestically and globally, and supporting roughly 249,000 jobs across the country, I'm happy to present today on global food insecurity. We all recognize that the topic of food insecurity is complex, and agriculture and agri-food play a key role in addressing solutions. The question we must ask is how agri-food can work across multiple jurisdictions and ministries, both domestically and globally, to ensure at-risk populations have the appropriate housing, employment, education, and money to access food. Then there's the question of healthy food production and availability, and how agriculture can meet global challenges. The pandemic is but one factor influencing global food insecurity. In many ways, it has further highlighted an already significant issue. Supply chains continue to be strained, climate change has impacted our markets in Canada and globally, and the war in the Ukraine has added additional strain to an already fragile food system. As we know, war and other factors have led to a price increase in essential production inputs and commodities such as oil and associated fertilizer, which has directly resulted in price inflation, which has directly influenced food insecurity. CPMA feels food needs to be seen as essential and perishable food as a priority in all policy and programs, with consideration of potentially fast lanes for both import and export models globally. According to the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, nearly 2/3 of businesses said a mandatory reduction of nitrogen-based fertilizer would decrease the profitability of their business. And 42% said it would be challenging, as they have already reduced their nitrogen fertilizer use. Instead of a nitrogen fertilizer reduction, given the difficult times farmers are in, the CPMA suggests what Canadian researchers are encouraging farmers to do: implement best practices to control or reduce nitrogen emissions. Some of these practices include conservation tillage, annual soil testing for nitrogen, and rotating nitrogen fixing crops. The numbers don't lie. The Food and Agriculture Organization reported an estimated 720 to 811 million people in the world were food insecure in 2020. Similarly, in Canada, 2021 stats show 15.9% of households in the 10 provinces reported being food insecure. This is a grim reminder, but also an opportunity for Canada to drive change domestically and be a global force to address international needs. As the only G7 country without a national school food program, we edge closer to the reality of investing in children's nutrition The CPMA is a member of the Coalition of Healthy School Food, which is a nonpartisan organization working to advance and support a national nutrition food program, which would allow Canadian children to receive nutritious food at school using a cost-sharing model. By doing so, we would work towards achieving the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal number 2 in order to end hunger, achieve food security, and improve nutrition. Domestically, I feel there are 2 key areas of focus: community change and industry support. How do we enable social programs which enable Canadians to buy the food they need, and programs which support agri-food production and innovation? Examples like the Surplus Food Rescue Program and Local Food Infrastructure Fund had an impact, but the withdrawal of the funds from these sources left many NGOs without the ability to be sustainable within a perishable food system. As a recipient of the FSRP funds, I saw firsthand the Invisible Food Network, which is 61,000 charities and nonprofits that support our efforts to address food security, all relying on a complex system of donations, logistics, and funding. Second Harvest reported that of the $25 million in funding last year, they had over $84 million of requests for food that they were trying to support, showing a dramatic need in the communities across the country. I will commend Second Harvest, as 71% of the funds were distributed to BIPOC community networks. Food security is complex and requires aligned policies and programs to support the ability to produce, access, and pay for food. The Canadian government has the opportunity to strengthen our supply chain to meet the dietary needs of the Canadians and the rest of the world. And I greatly appreciate this opportunity to speak to the committee and to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lemaire, and we're going to do just that. Colleagues, we only have about 25 minutes left. There might be some small room to extend, so just assume you're only going to get 6 minutes per party, and if I do have a little bit of room, I'll try to give a little bit extra to the Liberal and Conservatives. So, Mr. Epp, we'll start with you.
Excellent. I could spend 6 minutes with each of you. I'll start with canola, Mr. Davison. The dynamic of the food versus biofuel debate with the expansion of facilities in the Regina area in the context of fertilizer emission target reductions. Can you comment?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I would say increasingly, that topic is often framed as food versus fuel. I think it's increasingly becoming food and fuel as we have to deal with both food security and energy security as a result of recent geopolitical developments and other considerations. Let me just say that as part of global efforts to address climate change, more and more countries are introducing renewable fuel mandates as part of their efforts to do that, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Certainly biofuels in the context of the transportation sector, which we know accounts for about 25% of total GHG emissions, both globally and here in Canada, is a key driver for that. And biofuels are a proven and viable solution to decarbonize transportation fuels.
Thank you. I'm going to have to ask that you all send in the innovation strategy, and I just need to get a few more questions in. Sure. Thank you. Mr. Ross, you touched on the fertilizer accessibility. Eastern Canada, obviously, we've been importing a lot. We've collected $37 million in fertilizer tariffs. 2 questions. What do we need to use Canadian fertilizer, nitrogen in particular, in Eastern Canada? And what should we do with the $37 million?
Well, I think in terms of your second question, I would just identify that I think what I hear from Eastern Canadian farmers is very challenging times in terms of the operating costs they're experiencing, and a sense that money needs to be directed towards targeted financial relief for those impacted by the tariff itself. I think when it comes to accessing nitrogen for subsequent years, I think the biggest issue we need right now in Canadian agriculture is clarity and certainty on what the future holds so that people can plan accordingly for next year. And I think right now there's a bit of an absence of clarity around the policy landscape moving forward and concerns around availability of nitrogen and also pricing moving forward. So certainly I think there's a need for a longer term strategic discussion here, but in the immediate, we need clarity on what the future holds.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. Mr. Lemaire, California is short of water, one of the major vegetable producers and produce producers. What else can we be doing in Canada, particularly our greenhouse industry? What else does that industry need for infrastructure in order to displace imports and become more food secure in our produce sector?
It's a great question. The greenhouse industry has a huge opportunity, especially around areas like strawberries and even melons, which are now being tested and sold actually back to the U.S. We need energy access. We need to look at the carbon strategy and try and support the greenhouse industry more effectively, as well as a strategy that can ensure we have the labor that's necessary to support their efforts to expand. We're losing more greenhouse business to other countries.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll concede to my colleague, Mr. Lehoux.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is for Mr. Ross and Mr. Lemaire, the same question to both of them. So, Mr. Ross, you talked about the labor shortage. So this issue of labor is very important. Could you give us some concrete examples? So that's a question for Mr. Ross first and then Mr. Lemaire.
I can give you some examples of the implications, certainly. I mean, one thing we have experienced through the pandemic is a continual pressure on labor-intensive forms of agricultural production, like fresh fruit and vegetable production in particular, where producers are being left making very difficult decisions around the future of their operations due to a scarcity of labor. And so one of the challenges I think that has arisen
pardon me, we're having trouble with translation, I believe. I'm going to keep talking in English until Mr. Perron can hear me in French. We're now corrected. I've stopped the clock. Mr. Ross, back to you.
So I'll just conclude and note that what we do hear about is a continued pressure on some of these very high value forms of production to move to less labor intensive forms of production that are more mechanized to avoid labor pressures. And I think our strategic approach with CARC is very multifaceted and touches on everything from perceptions and awareness of the industry to workplace culture and HR practices, to the need for improvements to our immigration regime and temporary foreign worker programs.
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question. It's almost the same answer.
OK. Alors, si tu as une autre question, mais c'est presque le même.
So if you have another question, I could answer, but it's almost the same answer as Mr. Ross. So I would just like to add, Mr. Lemaire, with the modifications that were made to the program in the past year, have you seen some reactions in the field? Has it improved the situation?
Je vais parler en anglais.
I'll be speaking English because I don't have a lot of time left.
Enfin, we did see movement of our temporary foreign worker program and access to labor. But as Mr. Ross did mention, as we move to more technology and more skilled labor that's required to drive change, we do require increased immigration. We do require targeted strategies that bring in the right skill set for the right areas of the supply chain. Our biggest challenge now is actually post-farm gate, where the grower grows and it goes into the supply chain, and the warehouses and repacking facilities do not have the labor to move the product through to the consumer. And the push with the emergency shift to 30% within the post-farm gate has helped.
We'll have to leave it there. Thank you, Mr. Lemaire. Yeah, Lemaire and Mr. Lehoux. Pardon me. We have 6 minutes. We're going to turn back to the Liberal bench. I'm going to start with Ms. Taylor-Roy, but just be mindful that if you do want to split your time, I'll leave that to you guys to decide.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did want to ask a couple questions about, first of all, thank you to the witnesses for being here. This is a very interesting topic, and we could go on and on because there's so many aspects of food insecurity. But you talked about increasing supply, that it's the supply that we need to focus on. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on decreasing food waste, because obviously we can also address food insecurity by dealing with the 40% of food that's wasted. And especially on the producer side, the agriculture side, how you're addressing that so less food is wasted and makes its way to the ultimate consumer. And perhaps, Mr. Ross, you could start with that.
Yeah, sure. I would simply, at a high level, say that I think one of the key focuses from our perspective is on improving data management and data systems to ensure that there is the sort of adequate insights into supply chain dynamics in place to prevent food waste wherever possible. I think we experience and operate, depending on the sector, in a very just-in-time delivery model in Canada. And with the increasing disruptions we're seeing in climate change, labor-related disruptions up and down the value chain we've talked about, that becomes increasingly problematic to manage. And so I think it's really predicated on collaboration in the supply chain, sharing of information, and really strengthening the relationship between buyers and sellers to ensure that there is both risk sharing and sort of trust-based relationships to really drive forward together and ensure that a lot of the supply chain waste we do experience doesn't necessarily fall within one entity. It crosses the relationships between multiple players, and that relationship
Can I
is
just
critical.
ask you a quick follow-up on that? Do you feel there's a lot of effort or a lot of focus being put on that currently?
I will say I sit on the steering committee of the Grocery Code of Conduct process, and I think there is a lot of discussion in that we are under some confidentiality obligations, so I can't get into too much detail there, but I will say that building improved supply chain dynamics and trust and transparency in the system is a central tenet of that entire discussion and process we're involved in.
Okay, thank you. And just a quick question for Mr. Lemaire. You mentioned the National School Food Program, I believe. And I'm a big proponent of that, of healthy food and dealing with food insecurity in Canada. But I had a question, because when we talk about the supply-demand balance again, demand in Canada has grown for certain types of foods and appetites because of the lower food prices that have been kept down over the decades. And I'm wondering what role you think education has in actually switching food consumption behaviors, and how that can help with food insecurity.
So it certainly does. And we saw actually during the pandemic some of this shift where people were looking for solutions on how to prepare, how to store. People were going back to home gardens and community gardens. And that is foundational for shifting and changing behavior and knowledge of food. That knowledge of food is key. And how do we drive that through the school system? How do we move us back into an environment where Canadians understand how to buy, how to store, how to prepare, and how to get the most out of their food?
Thank you very much, and I'll share the rest of my time.
Thank you for that. I appreciate all the witnesses. I'm going to talk to Mr. Ross from the Canadian Federation of Agriculture. You talked about incentivizing climate resilient policies, how our farmers want to do this, and how we can support that productivity growth. You mentioned recognizing farmers for wetland protections. Can you give some examples of what is already happening and how we can take next steps to do that? Thank you.
Well, I'll speak to one particular example, being the Canadian Wetlands Roundtable, where there's a lot of work underway currently on developing valuation metrics for the value of some of these ecosystem services. And I would just say that across the board, I think that is one of the fundamental challenges in pursuing ecological and ecological good services programming, is making sure that there's a concerted effort with the right people in the room working on creating valuation models or means of putting a price on the public good that producers are providing. I will just say, when we look at things like emissions reductions, many of the practices farmers are being asked to employ predominantly have public good and public benefit without necessarily a corresponding private benefit. And it really is about addressing that divide that is fundamental to that this entire discussion, and really why there is this need to continue exploring programming in this space.
I appreciate that. And maybe just to stay on there, you mentioned 4 lessons that we've learned. One of them was you mentioned a holistic approach to labor. Can you expand on what you meant by how we can learn from it, taking a holistic approach to labor?
Sure. Yes, certainly. Right now, I'm co-chairing the National Agriculture, Food and Beverage Manufacturing Workforce Strategy with the Canadian Agricultural Human Resource Council and Food and Beverage Canada. And what we are doing is engaging industry stakeholders from across Canada, across a series of different pillars, speaking to everything from the need for immigration reform and improvements to our temporary foreign worker programming, to perceptions and career awareness, to HR best practices, workplace culture, and beyond. And I think what is critical here is engaging stakeholders from across the country, because there is no one entity that can tackle this issue, nor any person that can put their hand up and say, we've done enough here, because clearly the problem is getting worse, not just in agriculture, but up and down the value chain. We've never heard so much from our producer members as we have over the past year about challenges in the food processing world relating to labor. And I think we do need to take a value chain approach, but certainly one that is pan-Canadian and engaging the entire industry, because we need buy-in and support from all the stakeholders across the country.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. Thank you, Mr. Lewis. I just want to recognize that MP Lapointe is in the room. Welcome to the Agriculture Committee. Member for Sudbury, I believe, and although not a massive agriculture area, I know the Minister of Agriculture was up in that area in Northern Ontario this summer, so welcome to the committee. Wanted to make sure that was on the record. Mr. Perron, 6 minutes.
Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witnesses for being with us. I want to ask Mr. Lemaire, you talked about labour and the labour problem, and there was a change with the 30% in agriculture and agri-food. But if you have a quick recommendation to make for the government for specific change in the temporary foreign worker program, what would you like to see change tomorrow? Thank you, Mr. Perron.
For tomorrow would be ease and reduction of administrative burden on the farmer and also on those post-farm gate. So the challenge many farmers go through is just the administrative burden of trying to go through the process of getting the labor in. And that is fundamental. A lot of these farmers, especially in the fruit and vegetable sector, are not large operations, and the administrative burden that they have to go through is extremely difficult. So reducing the red tape and improving this and streamlining the system. And this goes back to issues Mr. Ross and our organization, the Fruit and Growers of Canada, have been dealing with.
Okay, merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. So in a few seconds, do you believe that if we gave more financial security to fruit and vegetable producers, it would help with food resiliency throughout the country? Yes, I think that's true. It's an opportunity for everyone. Thank you. Mr. Ross, you talked about percentages that didn't help with on the Russian fertilizer, but we also had some correspondence with the Union des Produits Agricoles, which wanted support to face sudden inflation. Did you get an answer on that? Did you have discussions with the government in that regard?
On that front, I will note that the CFA has a cost of production committee actually exploring strategic responses to what we see as the concerns arising from the inflationary pressures on our sector. I do think that this is a new norm that we're going to be dealing with for quite some time, and so we are internally right now working very concertedly at coming together with some recommendations and ideas around how we need to be strategically responding to this issue, because it's not going to change overnight nor necessarily abate in the coming years. So all I can attest to is I'll have more to share soon on that front.
Merci.
Thank you. You spoke about the need of creating a working group with producers. Could you give us a few details about that in 30 seconds, please?
Yes, I think what's needed critically from our perspective is there are so many different environmental policy initiatives underway right now that are interrelated in many areas. And what is needed is a group that leverages farmers' technical expertise on the ground in production with academic and technical experts and government officials to come together and ensure that the solutions we're putting forward are practical, do not constrain productivity growth for Canadian agriculture, and will achieve the emissions reductions that are intended. And it's really just making sure we're leveraging all the available expertise that's out there.
Vous parlez d'examen collaboratif.
Thank you. You talk about collaborative examen of agri-recovery after disaster. I think we have a striking example in the East. Can you talk to us about it? Was it well received? Is this group that will be reviewing the situation going to happen?
Remarks is more disaster recovery response after the fact to identify prevention and mitigation measures. What's happening in the East right now in our discussion and dialogue with our members is an effort underway to identify what needs to happen in the immediate recovery response period. And I think at this point in time, it's hard to determine exactly what that looks like, as there's still fact-finding going on about the scale and extent of impacts and what it will mean for recovery for Atlantic Canada. So we are connecting our members from across the country to learn from things like the atmospheric river flooding that happened in BC and responses that took place there, and trying to ensure that we're providing connectivity across the country. But it's still very early days to really comment on what's taking place there, other than to say that the devastation is significant, and we continue to hear very troubling reports about the impacts this is going to have on next year's production.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Mr. Davison, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you questions before my time's over. So you talked about the importance of having science-based regulations. Could you explain that to us in 1 minute or so? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for the question. We talked about the importance of domestic policy to support exports, and so it's very important. I think one of the previous witnesses on a previous panel referred to this, that we need to have regulations in place that provide a clear pathway to support the innovation that was referred to earlier, that it's well-established, clear regulatory pathway that provides predictability for the developers of new technologies and innovations. They have a clear understanding of what that pathway is and the timeline from research and preliminary development through to commercialization, because the goal is to get these new innovations in the hands of frontline producers who are doing the work for us so that we can increase our export capacity. And that starts with production. We need a clear signal from regulators. We need alignment internationally so that we've got common standards, and that we have a risk and evidence-based system that supports those regulations.
Thank you, Mr. Davison. Thank you, Mr. Perron. Mr. McGregor, you're going to finish us off for the evening. 6 minutes. Over to you.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I will bring it home for all of you. Mr. Ross, I'd like to start with you. You are certainly someone who wears many hats, and you are no stranger to our committee. We know, like worldwide, that the losses in agricultural production due to climate change number in the billions of dollars. And we know that future projections show that is only going to get worse. We certainly have our own experience here in Canada. I think we're very familiar with the amazing efforts that farmers are putting in place to reduce their emissions, to also act as carbon sinks. But I also wanted to change the conversation a little bit to like how we are trying to prevent climate change from impacting production, because farmers are really putting a lot of effort into increasing efficiency, increasing their production. But climate change is kind of fighting this rearguard action where, forest fires, droughts, floods can really take a big chunk of that production out. So do you have anything to share about, the ways that farmers are trying to deal with that, whether it's employing new crop varieties, different farming techniques to maybe inoculate themselves against extreme weather events? Anything that you can share that you think the feds need to step in a little bit more? You could even touch on some of the business risk management programs so that we help farmers get back up on their feet as quickly as possible.
Yeah, well, one element I'll touch on, and it builds on Mr. Davison's comments, is the need for regulatory modernization to allow access to new technologies and products to ensure that farmers can employ new varieties, which is something that is certainly being done across Canada as they become available to deal with the new pressures we're experiencing. But the time lag on approvals only delays our ability to leverage those technologies. So I think it really is critical that we streamline our regulatory processes to make sure that they're risk-based, outcome-based, and really targeted on ensuring farmers have the tools they need. When it comes to risk management, I will say I think there's a real need when it comes to disaster responses in particular to take a step back, as I referenced in my comments, and really bring industry leaders, technical experts, and government officials together in the aftermath of disasters to learn from what happened, identify mitigation practices and prevention measures in a public-facing fashion to really start employing progress in those areas so that when similar disasters happen in the future, we've learned lessons and employed the improvements in programming, infrastructure, and on-farm measures that can be employed as well. And I think it really is an opportunity for shared learning and common understanding to help ensure that we're having that feedback loop and responding in kind.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Mr. Lemaire, I'd like to turn to you. In your opening remarks, you had talked about the energy requirements that our greenhouses have. And I know in a previous life I was involved in the construction of a greenhouse and putting together the boiler that keeps that facility warm. So I know how complex they are and how intricate those piping systems are. In terms of energy, I mean, is there more that the Canadian government could be doing to help you access renewable forms of energy, be that, you know, existing hydroelectric sources, reducing those costs, tapping into geothermal? I'm just wondering if you have any comments to share on that. And I'd like to have one more question too.
You will. So I'm going to be very, very quick and concise. What you're talking to is about a growth plan, and resiliency comes from a sound growth plan. And Alistair, yes, relative to innovative new energy forms, everybody's looking for them, but we really have to look at everything as an integrated model. Our infrastructure, our people, our energy, our inputs, and as Mr. Ross noted, the regulatory modernization. As we bring all that together, the elements around climate change and the impacts that we're dealing with, atmospheric rivers and everything else, we can navigate that if we have the growth plan in place with those integrated pieces, but also across multiple ministries. And that's where agriculture has to lead and bring everybody else in to drive change.
And finally, I'll have the last question for you as well. I was at the event last week, the breakfast that you hosted, and talking about half your plate, fresh foods and vegetables. And you made mention of the national school food program that we really do want to see in. I think that food security for our children is linked also to their health security. And maybe if you could just bring us home by linking those two concepts, why that healthy, nutritious availability to children is so important in their growth and development and in health outcomes.
So food security builds, and we heard from one of the other witnesses, it comes back into your housing, it comes back into employment, it comes back to the affordability and availability of food. And when children eat, they learn better. They're enabled and they're empowered to grow and develop, and that's our future. And so if we are looking at our future, the foundational attributes come back into a school food program that can be delivered and supported, but linked into also all those other key components from housing, affordable housing, as well as the key areas of just getting people working and engaged into the economy.
All right, appreciate that. Thank you to all of our witnesses. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'll cede my time.
Thank you very much, Mr. McGregor. And let me also echo, on behalf of all committee members here in the room, thank you to our witnesses, to Chris Davidson, to Ron Lemaire, and to Scott Ross. Thank you so much for your leadership in agriculture and your testimony here today. Colleagues, that marks the end of the first meeting of this particular study. On Monday, we will be carrying on with the study of Bill C-234. That is what is on the schedule, and the clerk has worked to make sure that we have witnesses that are there. So we will continue on. Thank you, and enjoy your weekend.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.